Gunshot! Boom!
How you going, folks? Look, I reckon you'll agree with me when I say there are two types of four-wheel drivers in Australia. There are those that are planning a trip to Cape York, and then there are those that have been to Cape York and are planning a return trip. And with good reason too. Look, it is one of Australia, if not the world's most iconic four-wheel drive destinations. The place has got pretty much everything you'd want in a four-wheel drive holiday. Now look, Shauno and I have been up there, we reckon collectively, around about 20 times over the years, and we've seen just about every aspect of Cape York. So we've put our heads together and have decided to come up with the ultimate guide to this season's Cape York adventures. So 2020 Cape York. And this is the way it's going to run, folks. We know that you guys know about Fruitbat Falls, you know about the sign up at the tip, you know about all those iconic bits and pieces, but we've put our heads together and we've decided to try and show you behind the scenes at a trip that is on everyone's bucket list and is an absolute lifetime high. So it is early February right now. It's early Feb, you have still got plenty of time to plan and make happen your ultimate Cape York trip this year, 2020. Now then, speaking of damage, one of the most common ways people go home on the back of a tilt tray is water crossings, and there are so many of them on the Old Tele track. It's one of the reasons why we love doing it, because we love water crossings. Let's have a look at a couple of the water crossings that are probably the most notorious up there, and even some that you won't be even thinking of that we've had trouble with in the past, and I'll try and give you a couple of tips to avoid bobbing around in the middle, water coming in, if you know what I mean.
We're going to start with Palm Creek, just north of Bramwell Junction. It's not so much the water that'll get you here, but the entry and the exit. This is arguably the hardest river crossing on the Old Tele track. Too much enthusiasm here will almost always guarantee panel damage. However, a calm, steady and considered approach, plus a bit of winching, will get you through this one unscathed. Yes, I'm up. Anthony's going to take that same line, and I reckon he ain't going to hang around. Holy moly, will you look at that? That's a drive. Of course, then we've got the infamous Gunshot Creek. Back in the day, this was almost impassable to all but the most extreme of vehicles. Today, however, there are several options, many of them trailer friendly. If you do want to tackle the original Gunshot, realistically, you're just dropping into a large mud pit. Be sure to have a plan worked out so you're not sitting on that bad angle with your engine running. The vast majority will have to winch their way out. Very few people drive it. But once you've dropped in, got the photo, winched out, you too can say you've ticked off the mighty Gunshot. Always remember, folks, put your winch cable right up high where you can get it, because moments like these, you don't want to be digging in the mud. North of Fruitbat Falls, you're going to come across a body of water that looks nothing more than a huge muddy puddle. This is Scrubby Creek. It is significantly deeper than it looks. Maintain momentum and get that bow wave going. This is one of those crossings that I guarantee, even knowing what's coming up, it's going to catch you by surprise. Next up, we've got Cannibal Creek. This has a steep entry into deep water, soft sand, and a right-hand turn to the exit. This creek has caught us out on a couple of occasions. The key here is to check for the alternative entry to the south. That means you don't have to make the harsh right-hand turn in the deepest section of the creek. This changes from season to season, so be sure to stop, jump out, and check out Cannibal Creek before you commit. Logan Creek is long and extremely deep, and you're going to be tempted to take the bypass on the right-hand side. Trust me, don't do that. These days, the right-hand side bypass is just as deep, but the bottom is horrible. Whilst Logan's Creek is long and very deep, the bottom is significantly harder than the right-hand side. Get your momentum right, get your bow wave up, and you will make it through Logan Creek the traditional way. Trust me, don't be tempted to take the bypass.
Okay, I've chosen the slightly less deep but far more boggy option down here. Now this could come back to haunt me, I don't exactly know. We'll see how we go. Window up.
Oh, bugger.
Well, this is where you wait for your mates to come and get you. Okay, here we go. Yep, I'm moving. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! What a ride, boys.
And then, of course, there's Nolan's, perhaps the most infamous creek crossing in Australia. There are several entry points to Nolan's and one exit. Be sure to check all of the entry points because they change from season to season. What worked this year may not work next year. There are 3 key tips to getting Nolan's right. Firstly, as I've said, pick your entry point. There's about 5 of them and they all vary significantly. Secondly, Nolan's has got a very soft sandy base, so just like driving on the beach, let your tyres right down. You can always pump them back up again when you get out the exit. And thirdly, wait for the vehicle in front of you to go through and let the sand settle back down. This is critical. If you follow the vehicle directly after they've gone through where they've just churned up the sand, it'll be at its softest. Give it 10 minutes and that sand will pack down nice and hard again, and trust me, you'll drive straight on through. And of course, it goes without saying, with a crossing like Nolan's, be prepared for the worst. Have your winch rope out or your snatch strap hooked up and a plan to get you out of the deep stuff before you start floating.
Now, look, I know I say this a heck of a lot all around Australia, but the Tele track has literally got some of the best campsites you will find anywhere in Australia. And right now, I'm going to tell you my favourite campsites on the Tele track.
Okay, in order from south to north. The first one I'm going to mention is Bertie Creek Campsite. This one's a little bit hidden. You've got to find the track that leads you into the campsite. I'll give you a hint. It's on your left before you cross the river. It's a big, wide open campsite and the river wraps around it for a full 180 degrees. It's almost my favourite camp on the Tele. If you're doing the Tele early season, my next campsite tip, believe it or not, is Gunshot. Gunshot itself is actually a beautiful little swimming hole and the campsites around it are pretty darn good. Be warned, last season, a large saltwater crocodile was seen in Gunshot Creek. Next up, we've got Sam Creek. Now the camping here is good, but that's not the reason for it being my favourite campsite on the Tele. It's the hidden swimming hole that you've literally got to see to believe. Now, it's not easy to find and I'm not going to spoon feed it to you, but I will give you this hint. The waterfall you see when you do the creek crossing is not the only one. Have a hunt around, you'll find it, and let us know when you do, because it's an absolute cracker. Next up, we've got Nolan's, which has got fantastic camping right next to that famous crossing. Early in the season, when there's not many people about, you're almost guaranteed to have this spot to yourself, and Nolan's is a great swimming hole. Be warned though, late in the season, it can be a bit of a circus, with people camping in order to watch the shenanigans go down, as vehicle after vehicle gets stuck in the deep crossing.
So look folks, during the busy periods in Cape York, I'm talking school holidays, etc., you'd be blown away, amazed at the number of people that get up there. The crowds can be pretty darn astronomical. So here's a couple of tips if you've got to go up during those times to try and escape the crowds. Some of the places where other people don't really go to.
My number one spot to try and beat the crowds is Cape Flattery. Most people in their rush to get north zoom straight past this little piece of paradise without thinking of stopping in, and that is fantastic news for you. Depending on where you go, you'll need to get permits and permission, but trust me when I say this little piece of ocean paradise is worth it. Alum Beach and Eddie's Camp do get crowded middle of the season. However, early in the season, most people don't pay it any mind at all. This is camping about as good as it gets in Cape York. Grassy sites, shady, right on the beach. The fishing here is insane, and the drive up the coast past the coloured sand dunes has to be done. Way out on the eastern edge of Cape York is Usher Point. It's a long, slow, bumpy and somewhat uncomfortable drive all the way out to the coast. But trust me, when you get there, this is paradise. Visit the back caves, camp under idyllic palm trees and fish the rivers. Honestly, this place is worth the hassle of getting to.
Okay folks, you've done it. You've made it to the top section of Cape York. Tomorrow you're planning your trip out to the tip, have your photo taken, have a cold beer at the top end of Australia, and why wouldn't you? But whilst you're up that way, what else is there to do just north of the Jardine? Because trust me, once you've come through the Tele, once you've done all the Roadhouses, you've been for a swim, you've done all that kind of stuff, most people turn tail and head straight back down. Don't do that. Trust me, there's a lot to be seen and to be done north of the Jardine.
Of course, to get north of the Jardine, you've got to cross the Jardine River. The Jardine River Ferry is fully operational between the hours of 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. It's worth remembering that it does close for lunch until 1 p.m. and then operates for another 4 hours until 5. Those ferry hours are extremely strict. If you arrive at the ferry at 5 minutes past 5, you ain't getting on it. There's some absolutely cracking campsites directly north of the Jardine Ferry, right on the river to the right-hand side. Go and check them out. They make the perfect spot if you're crossing the ferry late in the afternoon. Once across the Jardine and heading north, I cannot recommend more highly setting up camp at Loyalty Beach right on the ocean. The amenities are first class, and the vibe at Loyalty on sunset with a beer in your hand, well, it just can't be beaten. For a bit of added excitement on the way to or from the tip, you've got to stop in and check out the 5 Beaches Run. Heading east off the main bypass track, the 5 Beaches Run is one of the best trips you'll do north of the Jardine. To be fair, there's actually 6 beaches, but I'll let you find the last one. There's fishing, mud crabs, oysters, and the scenery is awesome. This really is a worthy addition to any trip north of the Jardine.
Cape York is tough on four-wheel drives. We all know that. You just have to look at some of the episodes we've made up there to see some of the damage we've done to our rigs. So what have you got to do in order to make it back home again with zero damage? Because as we all know, damage equals bucks, and bucks are better off put into diesel and time off work. So let's have a look at how you make it home from Cape York without doing any damage at all.
The bottom line is there are 2 things that are going to cause damage up the Cape. One is corrugations on the PDR, and the other is water crossings. Let's tackle the PDR first. As I've said so many times, tyre pressures are everything. Reduce your tyre pressures and it makes those corrugated tracks so much nicer to drive on. But with reduced tyre pressures comes reduced speeds. Remember, you're on holiday, you're not in a race. Another great tip for the PDR is keep an eye out for other idiots. You're gonna bump into them and they've got zero respect sometimes. The corners on the PDR really creep up on you. Slow down way before you get to them. It's quite possible to sit comfortably in these modern vehicles at 80, 90, 100 kilometres an hour on the PDR, but you can't corner at those speeds. Many of you think you can, many of you find out the hard way that you can't. Just slow down. The PDR and the corrugations on it will cause things to rattle loose. Check nuts and bolts constantly, put some ink marks on them to see if they have moved, and nip them up if you need to. Things will also constantly rub together. A good old trick is to use tyre inner tube in spots where things might wear. There's nothing worse than having your gas bottle rubbing against your swag. You finally get to Loyalty Beach, you got a hole in the side of your swag where midgies and mozzies can get in. Water crossings are a whole other ball game. and the key here is preparation. Where it's safe to do so, make sure you walk your river crossings. Pick a line and commit to that line, don't deviate off it. Be prepared for worst case scenarios. Have a snatch strap already hooked up or winch ropes uncoiled, ready to go. And finally, before committing to the water crossing, have a plan of attack. Find out who's going to be hooking up the snatch strap or who's running out the winch cable. When you're up to your windows in water, that is not the time to be figuring out that your snatch strap is in the drawers in the rear of the vehicle. Now, unless you are a Weeper or perhaps Cairns local, you're going to be restricted to the dry season when visiting the Cape. The dry season officially runs from around May to October. Without a doubt, our advice is to hit the Cape earlier rather than later. Early on in the dry, the crowds are almost non-existent, there's plenty of water around, the countryside is green, and it really is a far more adventurous time to be in the Cape. Late May is our pick of the months. As you're probably aware, school holidays are busy. However, if that is the time that you can only get away, and we understand that can sometimes be the case, we're going to give you some spots to get away from the crowds. One bit of advice during really busy periods is to get away from camp nice and early and make sure you're in camp nice and early. That way, you're not arriving late looking for a campsite when things are really busy. As for how long you need, well, realistically, the longer the better. Who wouldn't want to spend as much time as possible up the Cape? However, we all have time restrictions, so 2 weeks ex-Cairns would be just pushing the limits of letting you do the teletrack, get to the tip, and then blast your way back south again. 3 weeks out of Cairns would be just about perfect. You can take your time and see most of the sights on the way to the tip.
Yes.
4 weeks, and I tell you what, now you're talking. This would allow you to really take your time on the Tele, do all the other tracks, see all the sights, spend some time north of the Jardine, and then leisurely make your way back home again.
Okay, look, if when to go is a popular question, the number one question we get asked, head and shoulders, without a doubt, what modifications do I need to make to my four-wheel drive in order to tackle a Cape York challenge? And I think you'll be surprised at just how little you do need in order to tackle a Cape York adventure and enjoy it. Case in point, we took Jocko up there all the way to the top in a $1,000 Hilux, and he had the time of his life.
It's rough, it's loud, it stinks. That's mainly because of me. Okay, it's purely because of me, but I can't think of a better way to get to the top of Cape York for the first time. It's just really special, and I love this truck.
But let's have a look at some of the standard mods you'll need to make to your four-wheel drive to make the most and do it safely. A Cape York adventure.
Without a doubt, when it comes to setting up your four-wheel drive for a Cape York trip, the number one thing you should do is make sure your truck is reliable. Service your four-wheel drive and make sure everything is in tip-top working order. If you've got a niggling problem, get it fixed before you head north. Check your cooling system is working well. You're going to be doing some long distances in some hot and dusty conditions. An overheating vehicle is a real inconvenience and something you don't want to deal with on a holiday to the Cape. If you haven't already, fit diff breathers to your truck. You're going to be doing a lot of water crossings, and as we all know, oil and water does not mix. It goes without saying that if you're going to tackle the Tele or any of the other iconic tracks, you really need to fit a snorkel to your four-wheel drive. This will do two things. Firstly, it'll help get clean air into the engine bay on those long, dusty roads. Secondly, and most importantly, it's going to keep water out of your engine on the river crossings you're going to encounter on the Tele and numerous other tracks up the Cape. What's vitally important though is that snorkel is fitted correctly and is watertight. There's a billion corrugations between Cairns and the tip back to Cairns. And trust me, your vehicle will feel every single one of them if you've got poor suspension. If you've got concerns about your suspension, do yourself a favour and upgrade it before you hit the Cape, because those corrugations are ruthless. Likewise, worn out or cheap tyres last a matter of days in Cape York. Buying spare tyres is not something you want to be doing halfway up the Cape. They're expensive and often very hard to get. If your tyres are looking a bit how you going, don't try and squeeze one more trip out of them, especially if it's a trip to the Cape. Treat yourself and upgrade to a quality set of aftermarket tyres before you go north. Make sure you've got rated recovery points on the front and the rear of your vehicle, as well as a well-stocked recovery kit. If you're travelling solo, it's good advice to run a winch on the front of your vehicle and, of course, have the knowledge to know how to use it. If you're going to be towing, make sure the wheel bearings on whatever it is you've got behind you are 100%. If you're in any doubt, put new bearings and re-grease before you head off.
So like I said, over the years, Shauna and I have probably done close to 20 trips to the tip of Cape York and back. So what tips have we learnt over that period of time? Let's go through just a couple right now that might make your trip just that little bit better.
The availability of supplies throughout Cape York is far better than it ever was. However, it really makes a lot of sense to be as self-sufficient as you possibly can. Basics like fuel and water are available all up and down the Cape. You can get basic food supplies, 2-minute noodles, canned goods, and occasionally a bit of fruit and veggies at some of the roadhouses, but certainly you would never rely on that. That said, Bamaga does have a fantastic shopping centre where you can get fresh fruit, veggies, and meat. As far as spare parts go for your vehicle, we try and carry everything we think we'll need. If you know your vehicle constantly breaks CVs, for example, be sure to pack 1 or 2 with you because flying one in is a downright hassle. Something else we've learned is that going by yourself isn't such a bad thing. Locations like Bramwell Junction are great spots to meet like-minded people who are never too fussed if you tag along for the ride. Now, a lot of people have concerns about fuel availability. There's absolutely no need to be. Modern diesels, coupled with the availability of fuel at all the roadhouses, means you're never more than about half a tank from a refuelling spot.
A trip to Cape York is always going to be punctuated by roadhouses as you go up. Now, these roadhouses have learnt long ago that tourist dollars are worth a lot to them, and I love them to pieces. So I want to go through some of my top roadhouses and why.
We can't go past Bramwell Station. They run a quality outfit. Stop in for a night or two, camp a couple of days, make sure you have dinner with Ken and catch his speech that he gives every night of the week about Bramwell Station and the Cape in general. It is not to be missed and it is a fantastic atmosphere. Now, it's with some reluctance that I have to mention Cohen and the Exchange Hotel. First things first, Cohen has brilliant free camping just north of the town on the river. It also has the Exchange Hotel. The boys and I have had some rather rowdy nights there. I suggest you drop in, have a quiet beer and experience it for yourself.
Well, there you go, folks. I hope that has given you some inspiration and some tips for your trip this year, 2020, up to Cape York. You know, one thing I believe in is if you don't go this year, you're going to be another year older when you finally do go. So make 2020 your year to hit the tip of Cape York. It is truly one of Australia's greatest four-wheel drive destinations. Now look, if you are planning a trip up this year and I haven't quite covered some questions you've got, please put your questions in the comments down below. I'll scroll through and I'll try and answer as many of them as I possibly can. But folks, trust me when I say, get time off work. Beg, borrow, steal that time off work. Tell your boss you've had your legs sawn off and you can't come in for 6 weeks. Take the kids out of school. Don't worry about them. They're going to learn more. I've already said that. Just get up there to Cape York. Even if you drive a Toyota Land Cruiser, you'll still make it. Maybe even a Lada Niva. You're going to make it to Cape York and you're going to have the time of your life. All you need to do is put the time away and say, yes, I am going this year. Folks, leave your comments below and I hope you really enjoy your 2020 trip to Cape York. Hey, maybe you'll see us up there. We're going this year as well. Catch us then.